Hi, welcome to my channel, Ending War. Episode 2, Solutions to War that I've lived with. So I have been very lucky in my life. I've never been directly affected by war. However, even before I was born, I was affected by war through my mother. My mother was a nursing sister in the Second World War, and she basically followed the Canadian Army in the Canadian Field Hospital across Algiers, through Sicily, up the toe of Italy to Rome. And she told me gut-wrenching stories about this particular time in her life. And she told me about dismembered bodies and how the soldiers had to basically deal with the pain that they were suffering, and then even worse, the awareness that they would never be whole again. And she told me about disemboweled bodies where soldiers basically didn't have the organs that were necessary to sustain life, and they slowly lingered, and she was there for them. And she told me stories of a situation where she was living in terror for weeks while, I guess the field hospital was close enough to the front that it was being shelled, she was talking about, and you never knew if you were going to wake up the next day. And she just couldn't sleep, and so she was working. And finally some officer gave her a direct order to go lay in her bunk or her berth or cot, whatever, and rest. And she did. And that night, the operating theater that she was working in took a direct hit, and she lost people that she loved. And she talked about how she just went around numb for months. You can understand the terror, unbelievable. Anyway, she managed to get through that, and when I was maybe late teens or something, she came and said, "Oh, there's a new book out, Angus, you've got to read it." And I said, "Oh, okay." And it was The English Patient, and she said that was her life. But she said there was only the good points of her life, because she said there's no way that you could ever portray the horror, the terror, the unbelievable emotional crushes and just terror. And so she survived, and they got to Rome, and she had some leave, and then they packed up the Canadian Army and the field hospital, and they all went to the European theater. And she served the rest of the war in Holland, where she nursed it. And she told me there was no difference between the people, the patients that came to her. I mean, they took everybody. There's no discrimination. And the thing was they nursed the enemy, they nursed the civilians, and also their own soldiers. And it was senseless, unbelievably senseless. Anyway, she told me that one of the happiest days of her life, of course, the happiest day of her life was when I was born, but was the day war was declared ended. Because she knew, and everybody she was with knew, that there would never be another war. All the great nations in the world, that was it. That was the finish, the end of war. So the solution to war was to have an unbelievably big war, and then, you'd never have another one, because why would anybody have a war when they have this awareness of how absolutely dumb war is? Anyway, she went home to Canada, and she got married, and had 3 boys, and then she left her husband and took us to Vancouver Island, and almost right away the Korean War started. And then, of course, all those nations that proclaimed peace, and that was it. They all started building atomic arsenals, so that it was a pretty good deal. You know, I mean, if they got these new weapons, you have to build lots of them. Anyway, in the end, we lived under this shadow of the Cold War, which went on for at least a decade. And the thing was that if there was a pissing contest between some of these aristocrats and they started a war, it would just escalate. And we had enough atomic weapons by this time, when I was in my early teens, to actually incinerate every square inch of the planet Earth. And, as a bonus, lay down a layer of radioactivity that is totally incompatible with life. And not only that, but it was for 10,000 years that this would exist. There is speculation that some creatures may survive. For example, the lowly cockroach. Anyway, it wasn't a good time, and but that was another solution to the end of war. If we kill every human being on the planet, then guess what? There will never be another war. Anyway, thank you very much for this, and if you watched it this far, I hope it wasn't too depressing. My next episode is another solution to war, a little bit later in my life, and hopefully you'll join me for that. Thank you, and if you like it, subscribe and also give me a thumbs up. Bye now.